Going to get started. Hi, everybody. My name is Caroline McCrory. I'm with GigaOhm, and I am going to be moderating this panel today. And we have Telco and NFV on OpenStack. And we have here with us some very esteemed guests from the telco space. I will start with Samit. Let him introduce himself.
Hey, I'm Samit. I'm the founder and CEO at AppFormix. And what we do is optimize your cloud operations.
I'm Brian Sullivan. I work for AT&T in the AT&T Integrated Cloud Architecture team, and I lead team involved in OpenStack and Open Daylight, open source contribution through the Open Platform for NFV project.
Hi, I'm Rob Sherwood, CTO at Big Switch Networks. We put our software on top of open networking switches and make them programmable in such ways that you can do all sorts of fun things like that, including integration with OpenStack.
Hi, I'm Mark Baker. I'm actually filling in for Arturo Suarez, who was supposed to be on this, but got called away. So I'm the OpenStack product manager at Canonical. Canonical is the company that produces Ubuntu and Ubuntu OpenStack as a distribution.
Mark Rodriguez. I'm a distinguished engineer at Juniper Networks, and I currently run the Contrail Solutions Engineering Group. And Juniper primarily known for Open Contrail, which is a Neutron implementation.
Hi, I'm Ali Kafel, and I'm with Red Hat. I'm in technical product marketing, and Red Hat, we're a really software infrastructure provider.
So let's get started here. One of the first questions, actually, we have 4 questions that we're going to be focusing on today, and the first one is going to be around why is OpenStack? Why do you guys think that OpenStack is finding success amongst telcos? And either you can, since you have the mic, you can.
Since I have the mic, yeah. So yeah, we find OpenStack is being very successful on its way of being incredibly successful in telcos, probably for 3 reasons. One is the fact that it's a product that is open source, which is really very important to the telcos. 2 is it has a huge community behind it, supporting it. Many people here are actually contributors to OpenStack. Red Hat is one of the largest contributors. And I think the 3rd thing is that it really works. With the work that the community has done, including a lot of the integration to other components such as SDN controllers like Open Daylight, the stuff works really well. And so for those 3 reasons, I think it's become really successful.
Please, go ahead.
So I'd like to sort of build on the open source piece. I think one of the reasons that OpenStack has been successful in telcos is that they've had very compelling reasons to change their business. And it's been a move away from very proprietary technologies. And if you're moving away from one proprietary technology, you don't want to swap it with a different type of proprietary technology. So the openness of OpenStack, and then OpenStack being a part of OPNFV, very open source, open standards based, gives them a very compelling reason to look seriously at OpenStack. And also because telcos aren't scared of technology, right? They're not scared of mucking in and figuring out tough problems. And if you were working with OpenStack a few years ago, that was one of the requirements, and so arguably still today. So they had good reasons to look at OpenStack and the technical know-how to make it work.
So I used to work for a telco, and I used to hate when vendors would pitch to me, if you want to differentiate yourself from your competitors, you have to buy our product. Because it was a totally empty thing of, okay, well, if my competitor wanted the thing, he'd buy it too. What's the barrier to innovation here? And only through open source, only through these things are telcos actually able to compete with each other? Are they able to reduce their costs? And why is it seeing more uptake in telcos than other places? Let's be honest, there's a barrier to entry to using OpenStack, and telcos are large enough that they could benefit from the scale and staff teams towards this. And I think that's really where we're seeing the traction here.
Brian, do you have anything to add since you're from AT&T?
Okay, so mainly because it's the best option out there for open source at the moment, because that's the scope in which we would consider really reinventing the way we operate the network. It has to be open source because otherwise the economics of it don't work, right? And OpenStack is the best option out there for this, really what is a first generation of the transition toward virtualization. And it does work. It's got a huge community, And, you know, through OPNFV, we've been very successful in demonstrating that it works, and you can build a real reference platform with a whole variety of features fairly easy, and basically, you know, deploy it and use it in minutes.
How many engineers do you have, Brian, that's helped make it work?
Well, across the entire Domain 2 program, which is this whole reinvention program, you know, hundreds of engineers, right? Inside the AT&T Integrated Cloud in our technology development organization, probably more than 100, right? Mm-hmm. Active OpenStack contributors, somewhere around 20 or so. We've ramped up a lot lately.
Interesting. What are... yes, please. No, please.
So one thing that we're seeing, at least a lot in the telco industry, is you have, I mean, telcos by nature have about 100 years worth of assets and technology that's essentially burnt in there, and they have those assets, and they need to appreciate and sweat those assets as long as possible. But the skill set comes with that as well. So OpenStack actually, and some of the SDN controller options in OpenStack allow to bridge that gap technology-wise. So it actually makes for a very easy brownfield transition from the existing technology and networks that are currently deployed, and then it allows the technologies and some of the options in OpenStack allow the telcos to naturally transition and not only learn the new skill set, but actually try to find new business models on top of that. So at least what I'm noticing is it actually bridges a very concrete gap between cloud and networking individuals, and it actually works in the opposite direction as well. So you can actually talk at the same level when talking to network people, but you can also talk to IT people at a different level as well. And certain SDN solutions out there actually allow you to engage in that conversation. So that's where I'm seeing OpenStack actually being a very good option.
Do you have anything you want to add, Sumit? No?
I think it's mostly covered. I mean, really, from my perspective, what I've seen, I mean, why OpenStack's becoming successful in this space is because, as everyone mentioned, it's open. But not just that, it's the way in which it's designed. It's very extensible. It's very easy to mold it into what you need it to be. It's very easy to add functionality to it. And that's why it's being truly successful.
Okay. So I'm hearing a theme here that all of you are saying is because it's been open, it's easy for you to contribute to, it's easy for you to engage the community into trying to find like solutions that all of you as companies can also try to help each other solve. So how are you then able to differentiate as well individually as companies? How have you been able to take your customers along the journey and educate them as to why NFV, SDN, VNF, I mean, they're all three-letter acronyms. How have you been able to educate, your customers onto the importance of these things?
I'll take a first spin at that. What's great about OpenStack is this big tent philosophy that everybody's kind of come in. That OpenStack, in my mind, is really just an umbrella over a whole bunch of very different technical problems that all require different skill. So my company does absolutely nothing to innovate on what's going on in Nova and going on in Keystone, and we're very focused on in Neutron. If you want distributed routing for your physical hardware as well as your virtual hardware, we can help you, and that's something that not many people do. And so I think what's nice about this being open source is you can kind of cherry pick the one little aspect of this that you think that you can add benefit and add benefit there incrementally, and we can all do that in parallel.
That's actually absolutely, that's how we are innovating as well. I mean, we focus on monitoring, we focus on the analytics and the optimization based on those analytics. And all the other layer works, right? We are confident that the other layers work, and that's why we are able to, achieve what we want to achieve.
Ali?
Yeah, from a Red Hat perspective, I think if you listen to Chris Wright earlier speak, he talked about people and process are more important than technology. And that has been a big part of Red Hat's competitive differentiation, is that the people and the process we follow, which some people call culture, is a major competitive advantage, because by being able to do upstream first, where everything we do goes to the community first, and 100% of what we do is open source, And by having thousands of people contribute to, OpenStack and NFV and other technologies, it's given us really the advantage to support our customers. So supporting customers is really important because there's a big difference between a project and a product, and a product needs to be supported. So support is one. Number two is the fact that we do co-engineering of our products. For example, OpenStack and Linux, we co-engineer them, so we're able to really integrate and stabilize the product, much better than if we were just working on one. So that's two. And then the third thing is really our partner ecosystem, because at the end of the day, a software infrastructure by itself doesn't provide a whole lot of value if you don't have partners on top of it, like the VNFs and the SDN controllers and so on. So partner is the third way we really differentiate ourselves.
So you've just started to answer my second question, which was how is OpenStack supporting and enriching Open NFV efforts? So thank you for that good lead in there. From Canonical's perspective, do you see the same support from OpenStack when it comes to NFV for you?
Yeah, sure. So picking up on and one of the things actually Chris Wright said in the Red Hat session was that installation is kind of just the beginning of your problems with OpenStack, right? So and the real fun comes in operations, and that's one of the areas that we've learned kind of the hard way working with some big demanding telcos is that actually it's operations, the kind of mundane, boring, but very important things of how do you back it up, how do you update, how do you upgrade, how do you do these things in a way that doesn't require a ton of very smart, expensive engineers, right? Because not all telcos want to spend that money. So we spent a lot of time differentiating in that area around operations, how we can not only crowdsource code in the way that OpenStack does very well, but crowdsource operations, encapsulating those operations as code in common actions. And your question was specifically about
how is the foundation supporting these efforts and pushing forward with OpenNFV as well?
So there's definitely a connection. So I sit on the OpenStack board actually, so I have a good view on this. Mm-hmm. And there's definitely coordination. So the board will try and coordinate to sit with OPNFV board members. And indeed, some of the board members that were in OpenStack are now board members of OPNFV. So there's very good synergy there. In terms of some of the efforts that go to coordinate that, there's a product working group that's part of the OpenStack Foundation that has a lot of input from OPNFV and telco users. And so we'll try and shape, as best you can, herd all the cats, as it were, but try and shape the roadmap of upstream OpenStack to accommodate some of those requirements. And good examples of those are around the management of performance, the management of redundancy in certain areas. And then specifically through the operators working group. So if anybody's been to the operators meetups, the operators groups, there's one just in the last month or so in New York, there's generally a strong presence from Telco there, and they will give their feedback very bluntly and very loudly to us distributors saying what we're doing, what we're not doing right, or what we could improve, and sometimes tell us what we're doing right too. So, and those are foundation kind of led events, and they're very good forums for that interaction.
Super. Anything any of the others would like to add? From as far as OpenStack supporting the initiatives? Yeah,
from just a very basic fundamental approach, I mean, the fact that there's a track at the summits, and there has been since Vancouver, right?
Yep.
The fact that, the use case of NFV for OpenStack is recognized, and that there are active work toward addressing some of the pain points that telco operators feel, right, with OpenStack, as we deploy it and we live with it, right, the scalability, the efficiency, the manageability, et cetera. Specific projects going forward with specific blueprints that address piece by piece the missing pieces, right? Mm-hmm. And then in the bigger picture of the overall life cycle of operating applications inside this space, the accommodation of, for example, the standards for the way that VNFs will be packaged and imported and operated through their life cycle. The things that we're driving in TM Forum, for example, Etsy and Oasis, the support inside projects in OpenStack for that, right? And as I'll talk here in a little bit, the support for the, the monitoring and operations of
Mano.
the cloud, right?
The Mano side of it.
With telemetry, et cetera, and closed loop monitoring, et cetera. These are all fundamentally important things. You don't just spin it up and let it run, right? You have to actually watch it very closely.
So, I mean, more specifically, like in the telco space, in the NFV space, just reiterating what was just said, I do believe that monitoring, telemetry, far more important than, in the whole other world of where we say cattle, where things can just die. I mean, these are mission critical workloads.
Yep.
And we got to drive that home, have better benchmarking, have robust monitoring, telemetry, and closed loop operations to make sure that the infrastructure keeps running.
Okay, Marco?
I'll just add that based on, again, my experience. Telemetry is obviously a very key component to it. It's a very, allows you to analyze and obviously understand what the workloads are doing. We have to remember, a lot of these telcos, they have an infrastructure already and applications. They have certain connectivity requirements that go way and beyond what certain components in the OpenStack framework offer today. And so things like high scale performance, you got a myriad of features. I won't list them. So they're hooked on their features. It's their sauce, right? And it's very, what I'm finding the transition is most telcos think they just take their existing applications and someone wraps it in a virtual machine and they put it on OpenStack and they claim success. And that's actually not the case, right? There's a lot more work to be done. Beyond that, VNF vendors really have to start moving towards a more cloud-native approach. Start adopting containers, leveraging whatever type container-based ecosystem you want to use for orchestration, deployment, and all that. But it's definitely a long road. But the challenge with telcos is they have an existing set of customers and they have a certain expectation. And whether we appreciate it or not, the network's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's just as crucial, if not more crucial than electricity. Well, obviously not electricity, but utility, right? It's a utility, and it's always there, right? So you have to understand there's this infrastructure. So ripping that up and trying to place key components of that in a new environment that's kind of going through its pain points right now isn't going to happen overnight, and there's definitely a lot of learning. So just the point I want to reiterate is monitoring and KPIs and telemetry is very important, but there's still a certain expectation of a benchmark to ensure as things transition to this environment, certain levels of performance need to be maintained as well, or else the economics all get blown out of it as well.
Okay, I completely agree. And you mentioned containers, which tees me up nicely to my question of how, as the esteemed panel, how do you feel that containers are impacting telco and NFV workloads as a whole? And it's open to whoever.
I will jump out early and actually say something intentionally controversial, not because I'm anticipating everybody's going to say that containers are incredibly important. I'm going to say that actually for NFV workloads specifically, I don't think the containers actually solve a lot of problems. Containers are actually really useful if you're trying to spin up and spin down things really quickly, if you're trying to package up complex dependencies. Containers are really good if you want to pack things really densely. None of these things apply to NFV. NFVs are incredibly CPU-intensive workloads. They're kind of really bandwidth I/O-intensive workloads. You're not going to pack them densely. They go up and they stay up for long periods of time. They follow very predictive usage cycles, day in and day out. Do I think containers are fantastic for all sorts of problems? Absolutely. Do I think they're particularly well-suited for NFV? No.
So now I'm really disappointed because I was going to say a very similar thing when I was waiting for. I was waiting to have an opposing opinion. So I do.
Prepared for that.
I know. We should have done some homework. But so no, I think all the engineering we see is very much on KVM or even VMware today, integration with OpenStack, just because that's what people know. It's kind of more proven, exactly the workload characteristics that were described. So, but we do see containers being used. People are interested in the performance, right? So if I get throughput of X on a hypervisor, how does that performance look if I'm running in a container, right? Is the overhead of that hypervisor significant in the mix? And but going into anything like production, containers are not there right now.
Well, this is great. We can start to disagree because so far we're agreeing on everything. For the most part, I kind of agree to the statements that were made, but not totally. I think containers for telco right now is not ready yet. But I think in maybe a couple of years or so, we might see, maybe even sooner, we might see change. I think you heard, Chris mention, we did a survey, 58% of our OpenStack customers are using containers. And I think, people in this room probably know the benefits of containers. Some of it was mentioned here. I think in areas like performance and restart. For example, in HA, when you do HA, when you restart a VNF because failures happen and you need to recover, containers will make a big difference there. And then just in general in terms of performance and latency. But we just really started this whole NFV using VM a few years ago. A lot of progress has been made. There's a lot of deployments. And I think work on containers have just started in the telcos. There's been some POCs, and I believe in a couple of years or so we'll see more and more containers in the telco space. Don't know if Brian agree with that, but from AT&T.
Yeah, so just very briefly, containers are going to help the efficiency of the resource usage, certainly, right? But they are not the end solution. They're not going to solve how do you re-implement all the network functions that you've deployed over the years, right?
Yeah.
That takes a significantly more evolved step, right? As Chris Rice put it in the Open Daylight Summit, in his keynote, he said that, the existing network functions are like snowflakes, right? They are unique. They are fragile. They're basically like pets, but in a different way, right? All right. What we need are Lego blocks, right? And so we've got to go to a cloud-native architecture. We've got to completely re-engineer, redevelop, break apart these things, and deploy them in a way that will really deal, with the challenges of the future: scalability, efficiency, functional elasticity, and all those things. So containers are only a step in the process.
So I want to go a little bit deeper. Do you find that containers are not suited because it's layer 2 or layer 3, like today, as it is today? Like, is there a specific thing that it does better than others?
Right. And I recognize you had next, but to change the question, I'll give it to you. But so, containers were designed to solve a developer's problem.
Correct.
Right, which is, how do I package up the environment that my app is expected to run in?
Yeah.
And so it does that really, really well. Now, if you look at the networking stack that goes with containers, it is frankly not nearly as mature as what Neutron is.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm a big fan of Courier and techniques like this that are trying to bring this up to date. Most customers who are looking at containers haven't gotten to the point where they have the SLA requirements that a large bank has, which is, in my 3-tier app, but as I go between tiers, I have to go through a firewall with each hop. Right?
Yeah.
That's really hard to do with existing container technology right now.
Yep.